Okay, forget about the quiz. I'll work out on the quiz issue how to make visible and so to let you to write down itself, to write the answer in it. We'll proceed with the lecturing. I'll find out the best way how to make the test for you so that it can be evaluated efficiently. So our new topic today is related to consumer and producers and the efficiency of the market itself. So talking about the consumers, all of us face the problem when you go to the market, to the grocery, it can be supermarket, it can be small shop. When you go there and you realize that the price of something becomes very expensive to you. And for example, nowadays we're facing like pandemic, which is coronavirus. And what are people mostly demanding is the mask. When you go to the pharmacy and you want to find a mask there, if you find it, you will find it with a higher price. And this is due to the limited number of the masks. And because the demand has increased, there is a huge demand shock comes from the demand side, and the supply is limited for a short run. And due to this reason, the consumers, the demand is always willing to pay less to get maximum surplus from it. Okay. So to measure, basically the consumer surplus we are using to measure the welfare or well-being of economy. This study will show you how to allocate the resources. Let me just off my WhatsApp. So it will show us how the economy should allocate the resources that will affect or that will improve the economic well-being. The consumer surplus basically refer to the benefits that the buyers get from engaging in the market transaction. Of course, apart from that, there is a producer surplus where the sellers, they get the benefit when they engage in the market transaction. And this makes it makes the economy and the society to get the benefit as large as possible. In the market, in equilibrium of supply and demand, maximize the total benefit received by all buyers and the sellers combined. So we have a consumer surplus and the producer surplus. In a consumer surplus, as I said, it shows you the benefit that you get it when you purchase something, and the sellers, they get the benefit when they sell something. So simply to say, it measures the willingness to pay. It shows the maximum amount that the buyer is willing to pay for a product and how much the buyer gives the value for certain product. Definitely, it's for sure, any buyer who goes to the grocery is always willing to pay less amount for certain product to get more benefit. And he put some value. He said, I will not pay more than this amount. He put some maximum limitation. He says, this is the maximum level that I will put it, and I will not pay from above it. So coming to the definition of the consumer surplus, it shows the amount of the buyer is willing to pay for a good minus the amount it actually pays for it. For example, a certain product costs $20 and you're willing to pay for that product is $30. So this is the maximum that you will pay for that product. So which means when you come to the grocery and you pay an actual price of it, let's say $20 as I gave you the example, and the willingness of payment from your side as a buyer was $30. So there is a difference is $10. So $30 is how much you're willing to pay. An actual price that you pay is $20. So for that certain product, you will not pay more than $30. However, when you come to the grocery and you pay just $20, and the difference you get it is $10. This is, roughly speaking, it is measuring the consumer surplus, is the benefit you get, is the pleasure you get it by buying a certain product, by engaging in a certain transaction. This is what we talk about the consumer surplus. So here is the rule. The lower the price you pay for a certain product, the more benefit you will get as a consumer. So if you put it in a simple words, willingness to pay minus price paid in an actual basis will give you the consumer surplus. So let's see the example in table 1. Buyers' willingness to pay. There are like 4 buyers, and these are the willingness to pay. John is willing to pay $100. Paul is willing to pay $80 for a certain product. George is willing to pay $70, and Ringo is willing to pay $50 for a certain product. Okay, the product is same for the John and Paul and George and Ringo, but it doesn't mean that this is much they're gonna pay. They are willing to pay, but this means that they will not pay above this. The willingness, the desire, they wish to pay this amount. They will not pay more than this because they value a certain product for $100 as a John. The Paul values a certain product maximum to be $80. So below their willingness to pay, will the actual price will give you the consumer surplus. So consumer surplus, it measures the benefit buyer receives from participating in a certain market transaction. It is closely showing the relationship with demand curve. As we know, the demand curve is telling you the relationship between the price and the quantity demanded is inverse relationship. The lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. So deriving the demand schedule from the willingness to pay of the possible buyers is here. As you can see, is a downward sloping curve. This is the price of albums of Elvis Presley, let's say, and the quantity of albums that are purchased. The lower the price, the more quantity will be consumed, and the more benefit or more consumer surplus will be got by certain buyers. So in here you can see that more than $100, nobody will buy it. If it's 100, only if it's between $80 and $100, only the John is going to buy it. Because if you remember here, John is willing to pay $100 maximum, not more than this. If it's more than $100, there will be zero quantity demanded. Nobody will buy it. If it is above $80, up to $100, there's only one person who's going to buy it. There's only one person here. Only one person. if the price is above the 70 up to 80, there are two people who are going to buy it, John and Paul, because the Paul limitation, the Paul willingness to buy is $80. Anything above $80, he will not be participating in that transaction. He will say, this is not my product that I was looking for. So I will not get any consumer surplus. So anything below 80, Paul and John will get the consumer surplus. So there will be two participants, two buyers. Anything between 50 and 70, below $70, there will be three participants, three buyers, John, Paul, and George. And John, Paul, and George, Ringo, there will be four buyers if the price is 50 or less. This is the case. Okay, guys. I have a question for you. Please answer to me. If the price was $40 for that certain product, whose consumer surplus will be higher? John, Paul, or George, Ringo? Who will get higher consumer surplus? Can you write in the chat? If the price is $40, who will get higher consumer surplus? John is willing to pay his maximum $100. John, very good, very good. And the lowest consumer surplus will get? Ringo. What about Abzal? How much Abzal is going to get? Okay, guys. Now, let us move. So, at any quantity, the price given by the demand curve shows the willingness to pay of the marginal buyer. Okay, who is the marginal buyer? So anything above the willingness to pay will create a situation where the marginal buyer will come. So marginal buyer is the buyer who would leave the market first if the price was above his willingness. For example, Abzal is willing to pay $100 for a certain product. If the product actual price is $105, then he will not buy. He will leave the market. He will be a marginal buyer. So the person who leaves the market and he doesn't buy the certain product due to the reason the price of that product is above the willingness of that buyer, he becomes a marginal buyer because he leaves the market first. Okay, here's an example. As we said, John is willing to pay $100 for a certain product. The product is in here, it's albums, Elvis Presley. And the price of that album is $80, as we can see it in here. $80. So the consumer surplus that John gets is $20. This is dashed area. If the price is $80, actual price. If the price becomes $70, the Jones consumer surplus increases to $30 from 20. And there is additional surplus created to another customer, to another buyer, which is Paul. The Paul consumer surplus becomes $10 because his willingness to pay is $80 and the actual price he pays is $70, which means he gains a $10 here. He gets some kind of perception that he's saved some $10. He was assuming that the price of that product was $80 and he realized that it is now $70 in real terms, and he gets a consumer surplus. So in total, the total consumer surplus is the summation Jones and the Paul's consumer surpluses, which is $40. So I can give you an example. You decided to go telephone shop. You went there. The price of the telephone you estimated to be, let's say, $80. Okay. Your estimation of the price of $80, you are putting the maximum price that you will be willing to pay for that phone. So this is the value that you assign to a certain mobile. You say to yourself, I will not accept anything above the $80 because the real price is $80. This is the value. If I buy it for 80, I will be happy. But when you come to the market and you find it out, the price is not 80, but $60. This will make you to feel that you saved some money on it. Like you are not paying 80, but you're paying 60 for that phone. So your maximum willingness was 80, actual price that you have paid was 60. And you will feel more comfortable and happy when you pay 60 because you will think that you saved $20. This $20 is to be as your consumer surplus. So there are some rules that we should keep in mind. Lower price raises the consumer surplus. Existing buyers increasing consumer surplus means that buyers who were already in the buying goods, higher price are better off because they now pay less. As was an example with 80, the price falls to 70 and the consumer surplus increases. When the new buyers enter to the market, that increases the consumer surplus in total, willing to buy the good at lower price. So consumer surplus at price P1 measures that the willingness to pay for that product is point A. You will not purchase, you will not buy anything above this point. So it's point between A and B, and C will give you the consumer surplus. However, when the price falls for certain product from P1 to the P2, it creates an additional consumer surplus to the initial existing buyer who is already in the market. So your initial consumer surplus was ABC, then it expands to ADEC, because as the price falls for the existing buyer, apart from that, and as the price falls down, new consumer enters to the market and he gets a consumer surplus as CEF. This triangle. So additionally, For initial consumer surplus from P2 from P1 to P2, when the price falls, it creates additional surplus, which is BDEC, this rectangle. And in total, they get EDAC, this kind of shape. One more time. Initial consumer surplus, when the price is P1, he gets this is surplus. From A, points are here in a triangle, ABC. As the price falls from P1 to P2, that means that for existing buyer, now he will get additional surplus. He will enjoy more. That additional surplus is underlined in here, in this rectangle, BDEC. And as the price falls down, it creates an alternative, an opportunity for other existing, not existing, for the new buyers to enter into the market. And it will create more surplus. In total, the surpluses will be more. So consumer surplus, benefit that the buyer receives from a good as the buyers themselves perceive it. So it depends on the buyer and his budget. If his budget is more than enough, then he will put the price willingness as maximum as he can. So more economists, they say that the consumer surplus is the good way to measure the economic well-being. The more consumer surplus, the more well-being the consumers they get it. And how do they explain it? As more consumer surplus left, more money saved. Those saved money you will use to buy something extra. And of course, with some exceptions, like illegal drugs. Addicts are willing to pay high price for the heroin, which means that those who are addicted to the drug, if they pay less or high, they still get same happiness. So for the drug addicts, for illegal drugs and products, is not assigned, like this measurement is not applicable. So far we have been talking about the consumer surplus. Now time came to talk about producer surplus. Producer surplus is all about the cost of producing. How much it costs you to produce something and to sell it. So it shows the value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. Let's say you paid $20 to produce a certain product, and for how much you're willing to sell. If you produce something for $20, a certain product, this is the cost of producing it, your willingness to sell will be higher. The higher the willingness of selling, the more producer surplus you will get it. The higher the willingness to sell in terms of producer surplus, more producer surplus you will get it. So amount of the seller is paid for a good minus seller's cost of providing it will give you the producer surplus. In a simple words, it is the price received for a certain product that you already produced minus willingness to sell it will give you the producer's surplus. So we have in here 4 sellers, Mary, Frida, Georgia, and Grandma. As you can see, the willingness to sell a certain product is 900, 800, 600, 500. Anything below this, they will not get any surplus. Anything above it, they will get the surplus. As you remember, in the consumer surplus, it was just vice versa. Anything above the willingness to pay, they will not buy anything. But in the seller side, in the seller's shoes, it is the opposite. Anything above, they will get the producer surplus. So producer surplus, it is closely related to the supply curve. As we know from the supply, meaning it's showing that how much, it shows the relationship between the price and the quantity supplied. There's a positive relationship. The higher the price, the more products are being supplied. So coming to the marginal seller, if you remember, we talked about the marginal buyer. Marginal buyer are those who leave the market if the price is above the willingness of the price that they set. But in here is the seller who would leave the market first if the price were any lower the willingness to sell. If your seller, put yourself into the shoes of the seller, that now you're selling a certain product and price is below in the market that you have expected, you will not get any producer surplus and you will not be willing to sell this product if you're not getting anything as a reward. Producer surplus is basically referring to the profit that you earn. More profit you earn, the happier you are. Here you go. As you can see, it's upward sloping. If it's 900, we can see that if it's 900 and above, there will be 4 suppliers, because everybody will be very happy to sell their products or services at higher price, at higher what they are willing to sell for. But if the price falls from 800 to 900 here, if it's between 800 and 900, there will be only 3 suppliers, because one will be out of the game. That person will be the marginal seller, because his expectation was minimum 900, nothing less than this. If you remember the table here, Mary says, I will sell the product at minimum at 900, not less than this. Anything that falls below this 900, I will not accept. I will just leave the market, because the cost of producing is 900. If I sell it above, I will get some producer surplus. If I don't get any producer surplus, there is no meaning of being in here. So she will leave the market, and she will be called a marginal seller. So at $500, we can see there is only one supplier, and that supplier is Grandma. She said that the minimum price that I will be selling for the product is 500. So if it's 500 to 600, then great, I'm happy. If it's below, then nobody in the game. Everybody will leave, like there will be 4 marginal revenue. If it's less than 500, there will be no one who will participate. There will be no suppliers. Okay, I have a question to you guys. I hope you're not using your mobiles while listening to me. Now, my question, who will be the most happiest person? Who will have more producer surplus if the price is $1,000? If the price is $1,000 of product, who will be the most happy person? Who will get the most part of the pie? Grandmother. Okay, great. Why? Because her willingness to pay is the lowest one. Very good. That's good that you're following me. Okay. Let us continue then. So basically speaking, supply curve, it refers to the seller's cost that are used to measure the producer surplus. And producer surplus in the market, it shows the area here below, as we measured in here. If price was 600, the grand mass producer surplus was $100. It is measured between 600 and 500. It is difference between the willingness to sell and the actual price sold for. So the willingness to sell was 500, and actual price that is sold the product was 600. And the difference they get it is the grandma is the producer surplus. And she's the only one who will be the supplier. There will be, can you tell me how many marginal sellers we have in here? Marginal suppliers? When the price is 600? How many marginal suppliers we have? When the price is 600? Rafina, not correct. Okay, more clearly, $595. Not correct, not one. Okay, guys, who is the marginal supplier? Are the suppliers who are leaving the market. Why? Because the price is below the price or the willingness they to sell it. If the price is $600 and we can see there's only one supplier, there are 3 suppliers are out of the game, which means they leave the market. So how many suppliers will be considered as marginal suppliers? Very good, very good. 3 marginal suppliers, because they will not sell the product at 600 below. Only the grandma is accepting because her willingness to sell was 500. So there's some rules we need to keep in mind. Producer surplus. A higher price increases the producer surplus. Existing sellers will get benefit as a producer surplus and increase in price. And new sellers, they enter to the market. Guys, sorry, let me just get water. I'm coming. My voice is getting stuck. Thank you guys for waiting for me. So there's a rule that we should keep in mind for the producer surplus. Anyway, I will summarize it, everything. So everything that will be kept in mind. The producer surplus, the higher the price, the more producer surplus they will get it, the existing sellers. But for the new sellers, they will get whatever is for that time. As we can see, the supply curve is derived. So if the price was P1, producer surplus for the existing suppliers is here, this triangle. However, if the price increases from P1 to P2, existing suppliers, they will get more producers surpluses. They will get additional producer surpluses as a rectangle in here, D, E, B, C. So this is a rectangle for existing suppliers, and only for new supplier there will be a small rectangle because it changes in accordance with the willingness to sell of the new producers. So as the price increases, it attracts more suppliers, because the higher the price for the suppliers, the better they are, because they will earn more profit on it. So now I will go with whiteboard. I want to share the whiteboard with you. In the whiteboard, I want to type the following now. We have consumer surplus, we said it is value to buyers minus amount paid by buyers. Sorry. So let me make it like this so it fits. So this is the consumer surplus. So consumer surplus is the value to buyers minus amount paid by buyers. So which means, as we said, is the willingness to pay minus actual price paid. This will give you the consumer surplus. When it comes to the producer surplus, it is amount received by seller amount received by seller minus cost to sellers. And in order to measure the economic well-being of a country, the economists, they say we should use both consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So we should add consumer and producer surplus together. And then total surplus will be equal to, if you add these things, I'll put it bracket in here. By the way, I'm gonna share this one in Moodle. You can reach it in Moodle. You just listen to me now, you don't have to write it, but if you wish to write it, you can write it, no problem. But I'm gonna share it in any way, these things in Moodle, this formulation. We will need this formulation in when we will solve end of chapter questions. So if we open the brackets, total surplus will be equal to value to buyers minus cost to sellers. This will give you a total surplus. Why? Because amount paid by buyers is the amount received by the seller. It's the same thing. They will just cancel out each other. Okay? And what will be left with the total surplus? It is value to buyers and the cost to sellers. This will measure This will measure total surplus. This will measure the economic well-being. And we know that if you remember the 10 principles of economics, when it said that the market activity, it organizes the allocation of resources. So there's an invisible hand, demand and supply, that will help the resources to be allocated by the forces demand and supply, and it will be done efficiently when it reaches equilibrium. So this is done, and apart from that, I want to draw something that to show the consumer and producer surplus in the market equilibrium. We know the consumer and surplus drawn here. So here, okay, great. This is quantity. So this is price. This is quantity. Let me draw with the green. This is supply. This is demand. If you name it like this, supply. Let me use different letters. One, supply. Demand. And here, where a black, this is equilibrium price. I'll put it like E and small p, equilibrium price. This region is, oops. This is consumer surplus. This is consumer surplus, and this is producer surplus. So this is the stage of equilibrium. So total surplus is the sum of the consumer and producer surplus. Is the area between supply and demand curves up to the equilibrium quantity. And of course, this is equilibrium quantity. Okay. So at this point, what we can conclude that it is the point where the markets produce the quantity of goods that maximize the consumer surplus and maximize the producer surplus. Okay, let me just save it. And some hints to remember. Consumer surplus, it is when buyers' willingness to pay, like a maximum, we can put it maximum as a hint. And producer surplus are the sellers' willingness to sell. And they put it as minimum. We can say like this, which means that consumer surplus, buyers are willing to pay maximum amount, not more than this. Anything below this price will bring benefits. However, when it comes to suppliers, to the sellers, above this price will bring benefits. So this is what you should keep in mind. Let me just save it. And this is all about this chapter. Next time when we meet, we will proceed with the chapter end of questions. We'll solve more questions related to this. And today I will let you go earlier. We've got 15 minutes. So actually you are planned to write the quiz, and unfortunately due to my faults, I couldn't manage it properly to arrange the quiz. So I'll work out on the quiz to make the quiz to work properly so that you will be able to enter something. And that's it. If you have any questions, I will be pleased to help you to answer. If not, I will put the video as well. And by the way, I'm recording our conference. All the conferences that I hold, I recorded and I just put it in Moodle. In Moodle, it is available in here. Everything is available here. Like under the lecture, there is a supply and demand for the last lecture, and I put it here, the video that I already recorded. Okay then. Thank you so much. See you then. I'm just closing down.